Peace and blessings, family. Brother Shareef here in Durham, North Carolina, at the historic Ar-Razak Islamic Center, which is the oldest mosque in the state of North Carolina. The Nation of Islam established this mosque back in the 70s, I believe, with a brother by the name of Kenneth Muhammad, and Elijah Muhammad sent him to this area to establish Islam. So before I get started, as always, assalamu alaikum to my Muslim family, praise the Lord to my Christian family, shalom to my Hebrew Israelite family, hotep to my black conscious family, and what's good to you to the people in the streets. And before we get started, I want to let people know I have a new YouTube channel called The Hour of Power, Shareef Hamid. The Hour of Power by Shareef Hamid. I have a lot of different topics on that channel, so please go to the channel, subscribe if you like, and share the information. I have a lot of different topics that can help and enlighten our people and free the mind, body, and soul of our people. Tonight, I have a special guest with me, Imam Maurice, who currently lives in Egypt, which is a continent in Africa. It's not in Europe, it's in Africa. He lives in Egypt. He is a scholar on Islam. He is a scholar on the studies of Islam and black people's and African Americans, so to speak, contributions to Islam. So we're going to have a candid discussion about our contribution to Islam and how Islam can rid the society, so to speak, of many of the social ills it has. With no further ado, again, I introduce my good brother, Imam Maurice from Egypt, but he's here. We're actually here in Durham, North Carolina now. He's here visiting, and he took time out his busy schedule to do this interview with me. So without no further ado, Imam Maurice, could you introduce yourself and tell the good people out there how you ended up in Egypt, which is in Africa?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm not an imam, and I'm not a scholar. I'm just a student and a acute observer of historical events. So I ended up in Egypt just from applying to a position out there. I'm currently a librarian, a reference librarian, an instructor of information literacy at American University in Cairo. I just applied for the position. It was my last year in library school, so alhamdulillah, I ended up getting the position, and I think it was a good choice.
Okay, all right. And what's different in Egypt there, Cairo? Is it Cairo you're actually in?
Yeah.
What's different in Cairo, just your everyday interaction with people or everyday things you see as compared to America?
I would say, as compared to America, I mean, I think a lot of people a little bit more open with themselves. I guess they if they see a friend and they embrace and they hug and they talk loud. I find it a little bit more peaceful than in the U.S. I don't have to worry about police shooting me, or I don't have to worry about child molesters and things like that for my son. For the most part, I think a lot of people get the wrong impression because all they see is the news. So I think just daily life is more peaceful and it's more sort of sociable than here in the U.S. People are just kind of stuck in their own schedules, and they don't really care about what's happening with other people. So
what's always fascinated me about Egypt, and probably I don't want to speak for other people, but I'm imagining so, is especially those who have studied our history, is the pyramids over there. And it's been this debate, they put on the History Channel, the aliens came and built these pyramids. Have you seen any of the pyramids that we see on these History Channels or National Geographic channels? Have you actually seen them?
Yeah, I've had a chance to visit at least one pyramid, and I've seen Great Pyramids of Giza. These are, magnificent structures. Of course, we know, these are built by, ancient civilizations that we know were the people's pigmentation were much like ours, and they were very advanced. They had a lot of knowledge of the celestial realm. They had a lot of knowledge of the earth and themselves. They had knowledge of self. And I haven't done as much research as I want to do on the topic, but what I see or what I've seen in Egypt so far, is like, these are monuments and testaments to the greatness of the human mind and the human spirit. I don't know if I can say much more than that until I actually.
And to your knowledge and observation, do the people who live there and were born and raised there, are they aware that black people built these structures, or like you said, people with our pigmentation, or are they under the illusion, like many people around the world and here in America, that some white people built it or some aliens built it? Are they aware that we did this?
So I think the educated people, the cultured people, wherever you go, are going to know the truth of the matter.
Mm-hmm.
So like one of my teachers out there, he's a personal tutor of mine. He straight up said, the original inhabitants of Egypt were black. I think that's pretty much
What's his
common
ethnicity?
knowledge. I mean, he looks pretty light skinned, but people are all mixed up ethnically there.
Okay.
In the southern part of Egypt, known as the Sa'id, which is called Upper Egypt, is where you find a lot of the descendants of Nuba. Of course, they're the original inhabitants of this area. They're the same people as in northern Sudan, and of course, I don't know if many people know that there are actually two Nubas. There's the Nuba people that are currently in sort of northern Sudan, and then there's also Nuba people that exist in southern, not southern Sudan, but middle Sudan, and they tend to be very well built, very strong people. They're known for their Nuba wrestling. So yeah, but they're also related there. Yeah.
All right. Bringing it back, I know we could go on and on about your experience there, but bringing it back here to America, because my work and my struggle is to uplift the minds of black people here in America. We have a lot of social ills here, as you know, because you used to be here in America, even though you're in Egypt, and you got so much social media, so I know you know what's going on. We got, especially and then when America has a cold, black people have the flu. We get whatever America's getting, we get 5 times worse. So you got drug issues, family issues, single parent homes, single mothers, educational issues. I work in education system, so I know that, firsthand. Violence, I mean, you name it. We have all kind of social issues. With you being Muslim and being very knowledgeable in Islam and the Quran and the life of Prophet Muhammad, how do you think Islam, could rid, America and black people, because we're the most accepting of this message, rid America of, these social ills that we have?
So, it's if a person, particularly a black person, accepts Islam, then they have to take it on holistically. Most people, or most Muslims, or people in general, probably don't know that Islam is really based on 3 core sciences, and that's the science of belief, and faith, as we might call it, which kind of gets into the realm of logic, of it gets into the realm of philosophy and things like that on its deepest level. But its core basic beliefs, which have to do with the way that a person is thinking. And then the second science is sort of the science of practice, and that is when I guess this is the most apparent part of the religion. You see people growing their beards, or you see women wearing a scarf, and this is really the science of your actions. And these actions are based on your relationship. So, whether or not you have a relationship, well, first is your relationship with God. That's your prayers and everything, and then you have relationships with your family. So that's when you get into marriage or divorce, or how you raise your children and things like that. And of course, you have a relationship with your society. You have a relationship with the country that you live in, the immediate community that you live in. So all of those things are under the science of practice. And then the third basic science of Islam is the ethics, which is really, some people might call it, the science of the heart. It has to do with psychology, really. How you engage yourself, what sort of ethics are behind, the things that you do. So, you can have the sort of correct belief, you can have the correct practice, so to speak, but if your ethics are all out of whack, then, it really doesn't benefit you, and it doesn't benefit other people. So, those are the basic things that have to, that Islam is built upon. And so when you're approaching, your life within an Islamic context, then you have to take on these three things holistically and really know what you're doing at each point in your life. So when, for instance, if you're encountered with drugs or something like that, first, you might think about your belief in God. What does God say about, intoxicants? And then, what sort of practices, might there be in place that are instituted maybe by the Quran or the example of the Prophet Muhammad that sort of would protect you from entering into these bad situations. So, one of the things is like you're not supposed to even, sit at the same table where someone is drinking alcohol or doing drugs or something like that. So just removing yourself from those environments, is very
more
important.
preventive.
Yeah, preventive measures.
Mm-hmm.
And when you might talk to someone who is a professional at Alcoholics Anonymous, and they tell you the same thing. Just change your environment,
Right.
change the friends that you hang around with, things like that.
Okay. What about the violence that we see going on across, America? No ethnic group is really, clear of it.
Mm-hmm.
You see it everywhere. You go out in these rich neighborhoods, you see violence. Of course, in the inner city, it's a lot of violence. Everyone seems to be divided. Like, what can Islam offer to remedy some of those ills, like violence, some of the things that we see on the news every day that's so depressing?
Well, the interesting thing I think about, violence and violent encounters and animosity between people and groups, a lot of it comes down to very simple things sometimes. Maybe they feel that someone looked at them the wrong way. They feel that someone, they didn't treat them with the respect that they deserve, or something like that. And when I kind of look back into those sciences that I mentioned, this goes into the science of ethics, and for instance, in Islam, we're taught not to be arrogant, not to arrogate ourselves over other people. So, if you think that you're bigger and better than someone else just because you have more money or you look better or whatever it may be, that's arrogance. And that's actually the first crime of the shaitan, of Satan, that is mentioned in the Quran. And really his crime was racism. If you kind of do an analogy of it, in the Quran it says that Allah commanded the angels to prostrate, including the shaitan, who was someone who worshipped Allah, everywhere on the earth. And so he sort of did his own analysis and says, you created this human being from mud, and I've created a fire. Mm-hmm. Fire is better than mud. I think I'm better than him. Mm-hmm. And this is what got him, banished and accursed. So, it's not just this is some, story that, we tell children or something like that. We want people to believe, but we're supposed to extract lessons from these parables. Mm-hmm. So, this is one of the many lessons that we can extract from that parable. That, not to be arrogant, not to think of ourselves as better because of something that that we sometimes don't even have the choice over, like our skin color, or the way we look, or even the place that we're born.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So basically, whatever God is whatever we have, it comes from God, and that's what. If we have that mindset, that's what's going to humble us. Mm-hmm. So, can you tell us about, like, I have two different communities I'm real close with. Mm-hmm. The Islamic community, of course, because I'm Muslim. I'm also real close with people in what they call the Black conscious community. Mm-hmm. It's not a religion; it's more of a mind state. Yeah. Being aware of who you are, what you are, where you came from, the contributions that our people have made, and connecting all throughout the world to uplift us. Some people call it Pan-Africanism, some people call it Black conscious, whatever you want to call it. But within that community, even though people know that I'm Muslim, they still have this thing of Islam is no different as a religion than Christianity, because Christianity enslaved us, took our culture away from us, and having that kind of thinking is the white man's religion, so to speak. But they also say because of the sub-Saharan slave trade and what some people in the name of Islam are doing in this country, that Islam is no different. It's just an Arab religion. Can you kind of touch on or clarify, is there a difference? Is there some validity to what they're saying? Because, even with my job, I inspect places that sell tobacco, alcohol, and liquor. That's part of my job, on top of me being a counselor in the school system with children that have behavior, mental, emotional problems. Another part of my job is inspecting stores that sell tobacco to make sure that they're carding and alcohol. And I have to be honest, 95%, if not more, of those stores I inspect are Arabs who claim to be Muslim, and they're poisoning the community with the same thing that in the Quran it says, stay away from the intoxicants. The Prophet even said whoever carries alcohol, on and on and on, he said he won't accept your prayers for 40, but then he never said how long. So I have to be honest, the same people who say they uphold these ethics that you talked about are voluntarily coming over here and destroying Black communities as if we don't have enough problems. So I wonder, it's closing out, I wonder if you could give us some insight on that.
So I would say, first that, that was my trajectory to Islam as well. I came through political activism and, being aware of myself culturally, and sort of the Black conscious movement, probably of a different era, late 90s, early and late 90s. Um, first of all, these aren't mutually exclusive communities. I think there's a lot of overlap. A lot of Muslims have come, a lot of black Muslims, African American Muslims, and even many white Muslims have come to Islam through this trajectory. And so how, Muslims somehow got separated from, the black conscious community, that's the topic of another discussion. But, I think in terms of addressing, these first, the allegations that somehow Islam was like forced on black people, it's just historically false. And there's some really good books that I could probably share with you. That there's first there's a book by Dr. Sherman Jackson called Looking Towards the Third Resurrection. There's some authors like Bilal Ware, who wrote a book called The Walking Quran. He deals with a lot of these questions, and he approaches African history from African people's perspectives. And most people probably aren't aware that there is a large canon of African history that is actually written by African people. Oftentimes because there's a political situation, of course, in West Africa and much of Africa in general, where when colonial powers from Europe came to places like Mali, where Timbuktu is, a lot of people hid their books. And so they hid their books from the Europeans, because oftentimes when a group conquers another group, among the things that they're looking for is their knowledge. So a lot of these books had to go underground, and they haven't been revealed. At the same time, they've also stolen a lot of these books and put them in museums and places like that. And they did the same thing with a lot of the monuments from Egypt. And they do it because they want to control the knowledge. They want access to all realms of human knowledge. And so when first of all, sorry, I'm kind of on a tangent, but
Sorry.
yeah, first of all, people when they read things about, say like the Muslim slave trade, I guess there needs to be a sort of definition. Like, it's not Islam or Christianity that enslaves people, because these are ideas to begin with. It's people that enslave people. So whether or not these people are living up to the ideals of these ideas and these philosophies, is one thing. Oftentimes, they're often manipulating these ideas to suit their own purposes. In terms of, I can sort of, speak on, Islam being forced in Africa. I don't think so, because there's no significant Arab presence in sub-Saharan Africa, unless you want to count Sudan. I lived in Sudan for 3 years, and I really don't think there's a significant Arab presence there. And plus, the religion of Islam, it doesn't have some sort of clerical hierarchy. The closest thing that we have to it is a body of scholars. These people have to exist everywhere that Islam is. So when Islam was actually spread in many places in sub-Saharan Africa, it was actually spread through schools. And one of the many documentations of this is in a book called Islam, Christianity, and the Negro Race by Edward Wilmot Blyden, which is written at the turn of the 20th century. and he actually lived in turn of the 19th century. Yeah, that's 20th century. So he actually lived in Africa for a long time. He started off as a missionary. Some people say he ended up, converting to Islam, but it's not substantiated. Um, there's things like that, and I think a lot of the documented evidence that some of our brothers and sisters and the Black conscious community use, these are the works that are most easily accessible to them, which are things that are written in English or translated from French or German into the English language, which basically European Orientalists, have used to sort of distort the image of Islam in the world. And we know that, if Islam was forced, in Africa, then why don't we say it was forced in places like Turkey and the Balkans where they're white people? Why don't we say, it's forced in places like India and Iran and Indonesia?
Because the world.
Yeah, this is a worldwide religion. It goes out west.
Not to interrupt you, but what about? Because I'm always playing the devil's advocate. What about? Since you were talking about books, Chancellor Williams' book, what's it called? The Destruction of the Black Civilization. How he talks about the supposed Arabization of North Africa, and he kind of referenced that. What would you say about that book and his historical evidence about how Islam spread in North Africa? Because a lot of slaves were taken out of North Africa.
So, well, first, if you really want a good sort of read the brief discussion on that topic, I would refer to an article that was written by my friend Rasul Miller in the online journal called Sapelo Square, which everyone should be familiar with. Is Everything Black and Muslim. So read that. But I would say, in terms of Islam in North Africa, the history there is very complicated. First, there's several layers of civilization in North Africa in general. So you have people who were like pirates and Vikings and stuff like that from Europe, who often did business and trade and intermarried with the original inhabitants, Black people of Northern Africa. And so if you look at some of these Berber tribes, they call themselves Amazigh, then you will find that some of them are very dark like us, some of them are very white, and they're not Arab people. At the same time, you had migrations from ancient Mesopotamia, and of course the Romans, they conquered much of this area in northern Africa at one point in time. So throughout North Africa, throughout like places like Jordan and Palestine, you have a lot of Roman or Greek influence. So these places are already mixed up ethnically. Now, Arab expansion into these areas. First, I would like first to agree upon that. Okay, we have 7 continents, right? Which continent is the Middle East? Which continent is that on? So, a place like Saudi Arabia, we often don't think that is it Asia, is it Africa? I would say that in one point in time, this was actually a colony of one of the biggest African civilizations in the world, the Abyssinian. They had conquered much of southern Arabia, particularly the Yemen and Oman and places like that. But there's a lot of sort of shared conquering and things like that. So when the Arabs sort of under the banner of Islam, spread to places in northern Africa, well, first the Levant, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco. These places were places that were previously colonized by the Romans, and at the time, if you kind of dig into the history, uh, there's a book called Stolen Legacy, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people are familiar with, by George G.M. James. He discusses the rise of Hellenistic Christianity and how they tried to spread it in places where the ancient mystery schools were present, and they destroyed the last remnants of it in the 4th century. So the rise of Islam occurred between the 5th and 6th century. So in in northern Africa, in the Levant, in current day Turkey and things like that, there was a lot of confusion about religion, and even in the Arabian Peninsula, and the message of the Prophet Muhammad kind of came to sort of sort of put an end to some of those conversations, but there was these wars going back and forth from the remnants of the Roman Empire and people in North Africa who often subscribed to different versions of Christianity that were probably a little bit more correct than their version, from my point of view. And so when the Muslims came, they found this these conflicts, and basically they just took advantage of the situation. They fought off the Romans who were based in Europe, and sort of brought peace to these areas, and they allowed the Christians to live there in peace, although and oftentimes they didn't encourage people at that beginning stage. They didn't encourage people to embrace Islam, because some of these people that spread Islam to northern Africa, they were out for worldly gains. We could just put it that way, and they weren't the best of Muslims, so to speak, but so they weren't necessarily out to spread Islam. They were just kind of out for riches and things like that. And so they would tax the people, and it was good that they weren't Muslim, because there's a special tax for non-Muslims. So I mean, there's a lot of history there, and a lot of comments I could probably make on that. But I would encourage people to read, just to read better, know the difference between the primary source and the secondary source.